Now to Project Community, WTAE Listens. It is an effort here to listen to the voices who often go unheard. To many families, 2 words can spark dozens of thoughts, emotions, and conversations. Those words are the talk. But what's the deeper meaning behind them for so many Black families? Here's Pittsburgh's Action News 4 reporter Chandy Chapman as WTAE listens to 3 local families sharing their stories.
You can move wrong.
Like many Black parents, Jamal Woodson depends on words to protect his children and at times save their lives. Several conversations on a variety of topics like how to handle racism or encounters with police are collectively known as the talk.
These are life essential that could keep them alive one day. You have to have a real balance because you don't want your children thinking that all cops are bad, because that is not the case whatsoever. You know, at the same time, you have to have it in his mind, and you have to have it in your children's mind that it can go bad at any time. I know there's a lot of families looking at it like thinking that's just normal, that's what you're supposed to do. But having a Black child and just being Black in general, there's so many things that go through your mind when you are getting pulled over.
Woodson says he had no choice but to suddenly have the talk with his son Desmond after he says police accused him of being drunk during a family outing on his boat. Then Woodson says he was accused of much more. So were you accused of stealing your own boat?
Yes, it's crazy, but I was.
Woodson breaks down what happened with his son by his side.
He said, well, now I have you on my boat. I need you to stay here. I need you to sit down. So I sit down, my heart's pounding, and he's asking me to give him he gives me a sobriety test. Once I pass the sobriety test, he said, well, I'm gonna give you a breathalyzer. Then he gives me a breathalyzer. Then after I pass the breathalyzer, the cop, he says, well, maybe you're high, maybe you're high. The cop up front says, leave him alone. Like he's fine, he passed all the stuff. And then the cop said, the cop who was interrogating me says, is this really your boat? Is this really yours? Can you afford this? And I'm like, what?
As soon as I saw it going on, it was just nerve-wracking because I didn't know if anything was going to happen to him. I didn't know if anything was going to happen to me. It's just, you just never know at that point.
Dehumanizing is the perfect word for that. And there's nothing you can do but just smile and just, no, officer, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir. And that's not the way it should be.
Woodson was eventually allowed to return to his boat, but had to have a tough talk with his son.
My son's there with me, and I can't tell you how sort of embarrassed I was that you feel less of a man, As a father, you're always supposed to be protecting your kids, but I'm embarrassed and you feel less of a man when you're talked that way in front of your own kids.
It was just a really scary thing to even grasp in the moment, and knowing how much he's done for me and he's done for the community. It doesn't matter what your title is at that moment. It's just that you're a Black man and they can do whatever they want to you just because they have that power.
Woodson is no stranger to the Pittsburgh area and loves being involved in the community.
Do a lot. Try to always get back to the community. I own a food truck. I have a lot of hats. I'm very blessed to be able to help a lot of people in the community. I'm the general manager of Whammo 100, 107.3 The Beat. I am the owner of the Abbey Lee Dance Company in Pittsburgh, the dance studio. I'm the owner of the largest basketball program called Slam Basketball. We have over 400 children in our organization.
Because of his family's accomplishments, trips to the White House have been common.
I've been to the White House many times. My brother and father have been given many awards in the White House by George Bush Jr. and my father by President Donald Trump.
And Woodson recently led a forum on how to improve community relations with police. But in that moment, on the water with law enforcement,
you're thinking about your life. You're like, survival mode, let me be quiet.
Woodson says he's been stopped by officers in his personal cars.
I've been pulled over 3 times in my Bentley, asking me where I'm going, asking me what I'm doing, why are you in this neighborhood? This is a nice car, what are you doing?
And in the company car.
Pulled over right now. I don't like this.
Woodson says he feels a person can do everything right and things can go wrong.
General manager of Whammo, driving the Whammo car, getting pulled over on a side street, and I am nervous. I am so nervous. I'm shaking, I'm worried, I'm panicked. I started writing down things to say, to my family if something happened, so it was on my phone. It's just things you do. And I know a lot of people might look at it like, oh, you're over-exaggerating. It's literally how you feel.
Desmond and his friends were pulled over by police recently, but he remembered the talk his parents had given him.
It was scary for us because you never know what could happen in that moment, and so we had to be very polite to the police officer, and then luckily ended up being a great police officer. But not all police officers are like that, but the one that we encountered with, it was great, and I'm just thankful that nothing happened.
Erica Groves felt the same way as Woodson when she had to have the talk with her son Elijah.
It's the talk. It's the talk that we've been having for generations, and that's all you have to say for it to resonate.
When Elijah went to kindergarten in Lawrence County, he was made aware the color of his skin was different than the other kids.
I was in my mom's room, like crying, and I said, I don't want to be black anymore. And then my mom said, don't ever say that again. Like, you should be proud to be black. From that point onward, I was okay. Like, I am so happy. Never again did I ever think, oh, I don't want to be black. That's the only time in life I can ever remember not wanting to be myself. And from that point onward, I was so proud.
That may have been Elijah's first talk, but it wasn't his last.
I remember when I had the talk with my sons, it was actually right after Trayvon Martin was killed. Our dogs had gotten loose and someone had called the police. So the police were kind of like following us around our own neighborhood as we were trying to corral our dogs. And it was really scary. We were profiled in our own neighborhood, and so I had to go and talk to my sons about that.
I watched the police follow them all the way as they were walking when they got our dog back up to our house. And I could just see the way they were looking at my family. And I thought, why? They're there to protect us, right? But then my mom came in and showed my whole entire world and said that's not the case.
Not ready for it at all, you know, completely focused on something else in a place where I thought that we were safe. The police were profiling us because someone had seen us in our own neighborhood and decided we didn't belong there.
I remember my mom and my brother coming back in shaken. People always say, well, that wouldn't have happened if they had done this, if you hadn't resisted arrest, if you hadn't looked at them, if you hadn't been walking down the street. And it's really just, if you hadn't been black, you would still be alive. That's really it. But people don't want to say that. That's what people don't want to, they don't want to believe that people can be killed because of their race, so they excuse it for other things.
Being one of very few black families in her neighborhood, Erica says her family suffered countless encounters with racism.
That's when it hits me the hardest. Like, most of the time as a black woman, I have my guard up, right? I didn't then. I was just excited to be in a new community, buy a new house. Was not ready, not ready.
She felt she had no choice but to eventually leave her home and move to Newcastle.
It was really bad. We had to go so they could be safe. Yeah. Sold my house and moved back to the city.
Elijah now shines at the Newcastle Playhouse and has starred in many productions. And he owes that confidence to his mother and father for giving him the talk.
You don't have to be ashamed to be who you are, is what I'm still carrying with me today, and it's the first thing that I'll tell my kids.
The conversations are passed on from generation to generation and evolve as society changes. Angela Dennis recalls the discussion she would have with her grandparents.
I remember conversations my grandmother having with us, you know, because they weren't allowed to look white women in their face or white men.
As a mother, what emotions do you have when you hear the talk?
A lot of emotions run through you. You know, you go from fear to anger, frustration, and also, you know, I'm still having to have this talk all in 2020. You know, that's to me, that's incredible.
Her son is Malik Hooker, Newcastle native and NFL player. Dennis says racial discrimination didn't end for him because he was drafted.
How did you feel when you heard that someone described your son as not the typical N-word?
I was furious, you know, because we lived in the projects for I'd lived in the project for 39 years, you know, and my son, you know, spent a good majority of his teenage years in Westry Terrace Apartments, and to see, you know, how hard he worked to get to where he was, you know, the blood, sweat, and the tears, you know, that for him to describe him in that manner, you know, you don't know him. You don't know what he's about. You don't know what type of person he is and, you know, to label him that way, it made me furious.
She worries racial bias could put her daughters and sons in life-threatening situations.
Malik's 6'2", 220 pounds on a good day, you know, and he has dreads, and to some people he would be considered threatening, and not because, you know, they stopped and said, hey, Malik, you know, how you doing, but just because he's a big black guy.
Dennis says her children have been targets of racism and have been called thugs and criminals while just playing sports. She says Malik was accused of stealing a heater while shopping.
He said, ma'am, how am I going to fit a heater in my bag? So it doesn't matter even the amount of money you make. When they see us, they see black skin that is threatening to them.
Dennis wants to reach out to people who see her family members as threats so they can understand her point of view.
When you're having a talk and you're trying to explain to them what the talk is, it almost seems like a story or a movie sometimes, that they don't understand that this can't be happening still, or that it even happened in the first place, that it kind of seems like you're making it up.
During her journey to bridge the divide, she was asked to write a letter that has now been published. She shares part of it to Pittsburgh's Action News 4.
To white mothers, this is how you can keep my son safe. From mom to parent, I am writing to you because you can be a part of making the world safer for my children and grandchildren. Talk to your children about race. The younger you start these conversations, the better the world will be. All black people are not the same, and all white people are not the same. There is good and bad in every race, which is why we must look past someone's complexion. Let's talk to our children not only to do right, but to stand up against what is wrong. I, a mother of 3 black men, don't just worry about my sons getting the chances to live good lives. I worry about them getting the opportunities to live it all.
And she hopes families of all races can be able to openly discuss racial issues so one day the talk won't need to exist. Chandy Chapman, Pittsburgh's Action News 4.